Hello everyone, this is Erick McNerney. Today I'm showing you Seurat. This is a collaborative effort between myself, Lyndon Parker with Channel Robot, and Glenn Lloyd from Divergent Audio Group. And I think we're pretty happy with this. It's turned out to be a pretty unique instrument. First you'll see there are snapshots in several different folders, categorized by moods and such, and there are about 175, and then there are 81 sound sources to choose from. And one of the cool things, you can randomize them by selecting the title of the category. So if you select guitars, it will randomly select guitars in that category. And same with violins or any other category, though the most useful would be for guitars and violins, since they have the most voices, most sound sources. And you can have two sounds loaded at the same time, which is a feature not present in head phase, but with this one you can actually do the same sample in both sources, so it's pretty cool. Now, of course, you have the standard volume, pan, and pitch for each source, and then this is pretty much all. The rest of it is not really standard. So I've tried doing this video several times. This is like my 20th take, and it keeps going, like, 45 minutes or longer, because there's so much stuff to cover. So I've decided that I'm going to cover the basics and just give you the sound of how things, when they get changed, how they sound. I'll try to explain some things, but I suggest you read the manual, because there's pretty much everything is described in depth. So here we have the octave buttons, and basically when the engine is on, which is on the length here, if it's anywhere turned down, if it's turned all the way to the right, the engine will be off. The Agra engine, the Advanced Granular Recombination Architecture, which is the name Lyndon gave this. So when it's all the way to the right, the engine is off, and for the octave buttons to take effect, you need the engine on. So you'll need to have it somewhere over here at least. So when you have that activated, let's get a different sound in there. I'll just turn this down for now so we can hear just one voice. So the first option on the octaves is not really going to change anything. That's what it defaults at. So for this, let's turn on some reverb just for fun. So for the second one, for option 2, it plays the same octave you're playing, but it also plays one octave below, and it's random, so there's going to be some variation to it. Option 3 will play the octave you're playing and an octave above randomly. So you can hear the change as I'm changing it. I'm just holding one note right now. So then 4 will play the note you're playing, an octave above and an octave below, and it's all random, as I said earlier. And then option 5 will play 2 octaves below, up to 2 octaves below, up to 2 octaves above as well, and the octave you're playing. So 5 octave spread for option 5. And you can do that with the second voice as well. And then the mix, you can set different parameters, and I can just briefly show you how to do that. So I'll load up actually a utility preset I made so that you can control the stereo width. And what actually you can do with this preset is swap the channels to be wide left or wide right, or you can just be them right in the center pretty much. One of the cool things you can do with that is set a MIDI control and then create some movement while you're playing. So I think that's pretty cool. I liked how that sounded. So how you do that basically to set the controls like that is you click these little toggle buttons here so that they're yellow. Then you press the letter you want to set a parameter to. Then you press the mix button. Then you move those values to whatever you want. Then you deselect the mix. Then you'll do the same thing for these. For these letters, you'll select the B. You'll move it to whatever you want, which it's already there, so I guess I'll just... Oops, sorry, I forgot the step. You gotta press the mix button. Then you move it to whatever value you want. Excuse me. And once it's to that value, you deselect it. Then you do the C. And I'm actually switching them, so actually press the mix, then you move it to the value you want, and then you deselect the mix. Now these should be reversed, so they should be going back and forth still. So if you'll notice, when I go left, this is the left channel is going right. So if we did that correctly, when I load this up, it should be doing the opposite. Yeah. So yeah, that's how you do that. Let's set the mix. Okay, and then you can do that with the pitch and volume as well. And down here we have the controls of the basically finer control of the granular engine. So the attack is the attack of each individual grain. The release is the release of each individual grain, and the rate is the rate at which the position is played through here. And then movement adds variation to the position, and the position just means the position of the wave file across time. So for instance, if I selected all these top, if I pushed it all the way to the top, these drew the table all the way to the top, that would basically play the end of the sample. So you, with certain samples, you'd be getting, you know, static or really quiet fade out, or maybe nothing at all. So if you have some randomization though, then you might get a little bit of sound in there, even if it's at the end of the sound, because it might bleed into the sound that's already fading out over here, because it's going to randomize down a little bit. So when you push the movement up, that's going to randomize it more. Okay, and then the length has to do with the length of each individual grain. So when you push it all the way to the right, that turns off the engine, and you're basically just playing the sample as it would be naturally, without the engine. And then we have the space and symmetry controls. This controls space. It doesn't say it anywhere, but that's what it does. And the way I like to think of it is just basically like a sequence. So if I have it all the way up, I'll get a better sound to demonstrate this. See, I'm just holding one note. It's the space that's creating the space in between the notes. So it's kind of adding a sequence of sorts. So as I pull that down, there's less space, so it's going to create a more busy sequence. And if we pull it all the way down, it almost creates a sustained note. You can barely tell that it's granulizing the sound, although it is. I think if we turned off the reverb, you can tell better. But anyway, I rarely like to put it all the way down there. It's really easy to get the volume heavy when you do that. So yeah, that's those controls, and then the symmetry controls kind of the how to describe. I guess it controls the randomization of like the uniformness of the space. Let's see if I can demonstrate it. So see, it's kind of playing them all at the same time. So they're kind of becoming a little staggered now. Yeah, it just adds a little more variation when you have it all the way to the left. And again, the manual will describe that. Sorry. And then, of course, you can use this to nudge it a little bit in one direction or the other. Then the one shot, the way I understand it, is just when you hold one note or any notes, it plays through the sequence, and then the last sequence, it holds it on that. Yeah. So you heard it kind of a little bit of space, and then it got less space, and it didn't really change after that, after just holding it down. So then, of course, you can change the number of steps and create some randomization there. And then, you can change the gain as well. I think I forgot to mention that. So one of the things you can do, I do sometimes turn the engine off, and then I'll have a second layer that has the engine on. And you can kind of actually create kind of a ghostly accompaniment, I guess, for lack of a better term. Especially sometimes it's cool to do the octave settings on the second voice, and then you have the normal voice. Don't really do too much with that. Some mistakes in there. It's not the engine's fault. Okay, then we have yes, randomization here, pushing that button. It's kind of similar to the position one. It's not going to be completely all over the place. It will go based on what your selections are, so it will kind of have a window of randomization. It's not just going to be haywire, haphazard, if you will. So that's how that works. And I think the rest of the stuff's pretty straightforward. Most of the complicated stuff is up in the middle and here. And so I suggest reading the manual if there's anything you don't understand, and maybe I'm not doing the greatest job explaining it, but then we have the effects sends, and there's a second page for those, and you can select the same effect for each slot if you want, or you can do a different one for each one, or you can have no effects at all, I guess. And of course, if you have them turned down, they're not going to have any effect, of course. Then in the middle we have the drift knob, which is an oscillator drift engine, as far as I understand. So it's basically kind of trying to emulate an old school pitch drift. And so of course the more you push it to the right, the more out of tune it will get. We'll see how that sounds. Or you can have something a little more subtle. Alright, and then we have the convolution emulations of various spaces here. So we didn't actually record each sound in these different spaces. So this just kind of emulates it through convolution. I really like big sound, so I tended to use the hall reverb quite a bit. Really sorry, I have a frog in my throat or something. Okay, and then the next thing we have is the sequencer. Actually, it's not a sequencer; it's a gate. It's a gate sequencer. And you can control volume, low pass, high pass, band pass, distortion, lo-fi, and formant. And in parentheses you'll see which parameter amongst those settings is being controlled with the steps here. So, of course, probably the most common one would be the volume gate. And you can create some interesting rhythms pretty simply. Just especially if we push that envelope, which kind of staggered it by creating the envelope, it makes it sound more syncopated. Pass and other settings in here. So yeah, you can load up different settings, and I've created some just to help you get started. Some of them are pretty basic, some of them are experimental, not too many. So I did a folder for each type of parameter. So light distortion, and you can go in and try anything here. So that one's definitely more experimental because there's not really much sound going on. It's more just choking the sound. So the combination settings, those are, you know, different settings in each voice. I'll try this one. So yeah, I mean, you can do lots of stuff with that, and like I said, you can save and load those. And one thing to note is the envelope isn't going to be very effective with anything but the volume setting. So if you have other settings in at least one source, it might create some popping effects. So I wouldn't suggest using that if you have you know, any other setting except volume. So I mean, it's not doing it terribly right there. You know, it really depends on the settings, and yeah, so just be careful with that. Something to watch out for. I think that's about it. I'm also going to be making a video showing some of the sounds. So sorry if I didn't show enough of the sounds in this. There's just a lot of stuff to cover, so I wanted to kind of cover the basics. But I hope you'll check it out. Thanks for watching.